And welcome to Capital Talk, a program we hope will have an impact on the future of Kenya. Now, more than ever, I'm Jeff Koinange. Now, you probably noticed that we are back in familiar surroundings. That's right, it's a week of conservation. What better to have a waterfall in the background, but that's not even the point. You heard Dr. Paula Kahumbu yesterday talking about lions being endangered, less than 2,000 left. Let's speak to someone who knows a thing or two about conservation, paleontology. He is the ultimate expert. And yes, when he was head of KWS, he turned things around, make sure that the elephant was not an endangered species. He did that job, went into opposition, went into parliament, was secretary to the cabinet, head of civil service. This man did it all. That's right, and he's still doing it all, working day, night and day. He's very concerned about what's going on in the north, in the Turkana region. Folks, comes to conservation, one name comes up. That name is Leakey, as in Dr. Richard Leakey. Good to see you as always.
Thank you very much.
How you doing?
I'm very well indeed.
Yeah?
Thank you.
You look well.
Yep. Wish we had a little sunnier weather in Nairobi,
But maybe this is what we're doing, Doc. Maybe we're just destroying this environment, aren't we, in a way?
I think the environment in Kenya is in deep trouble. I think the total failure to impose zoning, the total failure to impose bylaws in the municipal authorities, in the counties, has been a real issue. And I think the downstream implications of bad development are beginning to be felt. And I was with some medical people last week and drove them through the city of Nairobi, and they said the atmosphere was positively poisonous because of exhaust fumes and emissions. And they said in many countries they would have issued a morning alert saying women and small children shouldn't go out in the streets because of the danger of sucking in so many dangerous chemicals that you could be setting up potential cancer problems.
Oh my.
And this is a daily occurrence at this time of year, and we're just not doing enough to think in terms of future Kenyan lifestyles and the health of a population that is going to go 40, 50 million before very much longer.
Yeah. I mean, that's shocking, but what's not shocking, or maybe what's equally shocking, is that the number of cases of cancer, like you mentioned, various cancers, so many people, young, 30s, 40s, suddenly they have this cancer, that cancer, skin, you know, you name it, popping up. Could this be something to do with it?
Well, other countries have shown that environmental impact can have a direct relationship with cancer occurrence. I think partly today we're seeing much more diagnostic skill, and I think cancers are being picked up in rural areas. But yes, I think cancer is on the increase. Certainly talking to the medics, that there's some concern about a number of cancers that are probably environmentally related, and we cannot continue to pour effluent into water systems that people are drinking raw. I mean, think of the effluent from Nairobi, going down the Nairobi River, going down past the airport, through Donya Sabuk and into the Athi River, and think of all the people who live from beyond Thika down through that river down to Sabaki. I mean, there's several million people dependent on that water, and if you look at what's putting in, and you go along the upper part of the river where you see the water tumbling over rocks and you see the froth and the foam, and you do an analysis of this, it's frightening what we're doing to people downstream. There's no control over these things, and it's something as important as any of the other things that we're doing, I think.
And equally important, Doc, and I think this has totally been relegated to the back burners, is the Mao.
Well, I think the Mao is hugely important, but it's not just the Mao. I mean, all our water towers, all our catchment areas are important. And, you know, I'm of the view that the failure of a government to implement scientifically accepted recommendations on environmental protection, quality controls of air and water, these people are committing a crime against humanity. They are almost guaranteeing that an unborn generation will be a very tenuous generation in terms of health. It is losing assets which they should be able to inherit as the next generation in terms of green spaces, clean air, clean water, forests. And if a parliament or a ministry of the environment variety of reasons, simply doesn't take action today that is going to have a negative impact on hundreds of thousands of people in 10 years' time, is this any worse than some of the other crimes against humanity? I mean, are we not doing things that could kill tens of thousands of people with cancer that was unnecessary? Is this not a culpable offence? Should we not have legislation that would enable us to take to task the government, who are the custodians of our future? I think we've got to do a lot more than we're doing.
Why aren't we doing it, Doc? Is it because it's not sexy enough, the environment? I mean, is it because, you know, I don't know. Why aren't we doing enough?
I think it's very hard to answer that, but I think partly the reason is that our legislators are currently, and particularly now, preoccupied with the new constitution, what that carries for them. We've got a lot of popularist politicians. We will have a lot more populist politicians when we go to county government. And the fairly intellectual process of thinking 30 years ahead and thinking nation rather than district, thinking nation rather than ethnicity or language, this hasn't really become a widespread movement in Kenya. And yet, unless we operate as a nation, unless we recognize that what happens in Mount Kenya, what happens on the Tana River, what happens in the Tana Delta, what happens to Lake Turkana, these are all issues that affect everybody down the road. And I think we want to, in the spirit of the huge changes, positive changes we're seeing today, we can only hope and press, civil society must press, for responsibility in these environmental areas as well as in the political and human rights areas.
Yeah, you mentioned 30 years from now. Are we going to have any more lions 30 years from now?
Well, I think the good thing about lions is they're cats, and cats breed like rabbits. And you know, if we can retain the national parks and we can retain the biodiversity in them of prey species, there's no question lions can be put back into a lot of these areas that are currently lions have virtually disappeared from. But the fact that you can put them back in no way justifies negligence in letting them disappear. And the government, through its appointed agent, is simply not doing enough to supervise pesticide use in this country. Pesticide release, importation, illegal or legal. And I think one needs to make the point that the Pesticide Control Board has a responsibility to oversee legal importation, but surely it has some responsibility also to oversee illegal importation and not say it's not our problem. It is a problem. They're the only body that is technically competent